Morning, everyone. It is August the 19th today, and welcome to my early morning vlog. I figured I'd quickly post this vlog while I'm standing here in the Pain and Quality of Life Integrative Research Lab, waiting for my coffee to brew, so I can actually start my day. I thought today, while I was waiting, I might talk about two things. So the first thing I want to just quickly mention is the upcoming Pain UnConference that's being put on by the Pain Science Division of the Canadian Physiotherapy Association. Many of you will know that the Pain Science Division, which is the equivalent of APTA's sections or IASP's special interest groups, so divisions are groups of people who will pay a membership to that group because they have a like interest in whatever the topic being. The Pain Science Division was one that I actually co-founded back in 2008, along with a couple of my friends and colleagues, Neil Pearson, Diane Jacobs, Debbie Patterson, and the group. They are taking a very exciting for me approach to their conference that's coming up this fall. And this stems a little bit, I think, from what's becoming a little bit of a stale conference model. For those of you who have been to a scientific conference lately, you recognize that for the most part you sort of shuffle into a room, everybody sits their bums in a seat, listens to somebody sort of spout information at them, you may get a bit, you may write some things down, everyone stands up, shuffles out into the next room. Often not a whole lot of opportunity for dialogue or for back and forth interaction. There are a few brave souls will get up and ask a question, and usually that's about it. An UnConference is really taking that model and completely flipping it on its head, where it's the audience that drives the content. And while there are sort of experts or specialists there, they're really there to engage in discussion rather than just sort of didactically, kind of in a one-way fashion, try and fill the empty vessels with knowledge. This is great in my mind. I think disrupting the traditional scientific conference is an idea that's far overdue, and I'm super proud of those who are leading now the Pain Science Division for taking this initiative and frankly taking this risk, because I think a lot of people probably aren't familiar with the concept. And so anyway, I just wanted to give a real push to that group. I'll be sure to include the link to the registration page in the show notes here below. But definitely, if you're going to be in or around the Toronto area, check it out, and I'd encourage you to jump on there. Second thing I want to talk about is, now let's get a little bit more sort of science-y here. August is usually my sort of downtime as far as teaching and committee work and grant writing and that sort of thing goes, which are the things that usually take up 90% of my time. So I actually have a chance to do a bit of science. Incidentally, some of you will have noticed a ceiling tile right behind me that looks like it's about to fall out. This is the level of quality that I have here in the lab, but nonetheless, it's getting replaced. We had a bit of a leaky sprinkler. Anywho. You'll also have noticed that the facial hair experiment has clearly failed. No matter how much I will it to, a beard will not grow. So much to my wife's delight, that is gone. So as part of the science I've been able to do lately, I've been able to analyze a bit of the data that we've got. We've got piles of data sitting around just waiting to be analyzed. And one of the things that I continue to come across is that the traditional linear approach to evaluating things, whether that be the degree of change on a scale or the association between two variables, is probably not as robust as it could be. So my point here being that there's not a whole lot in sort of human nature that is actually linear. Although many of our correlations assume a linear relationship, most regressions that are done assume a linear relationship, most evaluations of change over time on a scale assume that the scale function as a linear tool. Those of you who know me or who follow my work, and I'm sure there's like exactly two of you out there, will know that I do a fair bit of rash analyses or other types of analyses evaluating the properties of patient-reported outcomes and other clinical tools. And the one thing I continue to see consistently when we do these types of advanced analyses is that the responsiveness of most self-report outcomes, most patient-reported tools, is not linear. What I mean by that is, if we go, I'm going to try and flip the camera around here and show you the blackboard. Once again, this is high technology at work here in the Pearl lab. What I've got here is the kind of graph that we often see after a rash analysis. And what we end up here is we've got the raw ordinal level score. So let's imagine a numeric pain rating scale from 0 to 10. Okay, so simple scale 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we've got what's called the logit transform score, or a linear score. And we can do this after a rash analysis where we basically take raw ordinal scores and we put them onto a linear scale. Okay, this assumes that the scale functions properly and that we can actually do that. What we see here is that the relationship, again, is not linear. And if I take an example here, if we were to look from a raw ordinal level, so from say a 0 to a 1, so let's say our patient goes, they rate their pain from 0 to 1, okay? A 1-point change on an ordinal scale is usually not 1 point on a linear scale. In fact, in this case, in this simple little drawing I've just done here, that's actually a 2-point linear change. Conceptually, what this means is that the change from 0, which is a complete absence of, let's say, pain in this case, to 1, which is, in my mind, a very important threshold. You're going from nothing to something, is actually potentially meaningful. So this 1-point change may be meaningful. Similarly, if we look at the other end of the scale, let's say we take a change and we go from 10, okay, and I'll bring it down here, we'll drop it down to 10 on the linear scale, to 9. Our patient then rates a 9 the next time we ask them. We drop that down. Look, that may again be a 2 or 2.5 point change on a linear scale. What this means clinically is that the responsiveness of a tool is not linear. So the ideas of sort of choosing a single, say, clinically important difference cut score. Many times you'll hear people describe the minimum clinically important difference on a numeric rating scale of 2 points. My argument here, based on all of the analyses that we've done on a number of scales, is that that is not a consistent change across the breadth of the scale. That a 1-point change at either one of the poles, so either going from a complete absence to something, or from the maximum possible to something less than maximum, those are both statistically and conceptually important changes in my mind. On the other hand, in the middle of the scale, someone, let's say, who starts at let's say they start at a 5, okay, we'll drop that down, and then they go to a 4, okay, and we'll drop that down, may barely be a 1-point change in a linear fashion. Here's the point of this. Sensitivity to change is not consistent across a scale. Based on a number of analyses that we've done using RASH, and you see the same thing in item response theory type analyses, most scales are more sensitive to change out at the poles and considerably less sensitive to change in the middle. The reason why I think this is important is because as people try to endorse the use of patient-reported outcomes, especially in pain trials in particular, some of you will have heard attempts to establish meaningful cut scores on these scales, like a 0 to 10 numeric rating scale. One of the more recent ones that I've heard is a 2-point change or 30% of baseline. That's an attempt to make things a little bit more robust, but actually in my opinion, and listen, I get that my opinion plus $2 might get you a cup of coffee, but in my opinion, that's actually even more wrong than just saying it's a 2-point change across the scale. 30% of baseline may work properly if someone starts at the very low end of the scale, but if someone starts at the very high end of the scale, starts at a 10, now you're saying that they need to change by 3 points before you consider that important. My argument that I'm just showing you right here, that we've seen time and time again in other scales, is that if someone starts at a 10, a 1-point change is probably important. Now, there's a caveat here, as there is oftentimes in research, and that is that the 0 to 10 numeric rating scale has not been subject to this type of analysis, and the reason being that you can't do a rash or an IRT type analysis with a single item. You need at least 2 items. And so people have tried, I've tried to do it. There's different ways you can. We can use, say, for example, a 4-item numeric rating scale, like a P4, something like that. But in order to do that, we have to accept that we violate certain assumptions of just the randomness of our error terms or residuals. So it's difficult to do on a single item scale, but there's no reason to think that a 0 to 10 numeric rating scale shouldn't function the same way as the brief pain inventory, as the pain catastrophizing scale, as a number of different scales, the NDI for that matter. So I hope now you can become a little bit more critical consumers of knowledge as you start to read evidence talking about the effectiveness of particular treatments on pain. Take a look at what they consider to be an effective treatment. What's a clinically important difference? I'm going to guess most of the time it's 2 points. Sometimes it might be they'll say 30% of baseline or 50% drop, something like that. I hope that you can consider this now in light of what I've just told you and just think conceptually, does it even make sense to you? Should it change from 0 to 1 or from 10 to 9, from nothing to something or from maximum possible to something less than that? Is that not important? I think both statistically and conceptually it is. So there you go, all for now.